there's something there about similarity and difference that also I find very interesting in the way this discussion is being shaped. But the question of epistemologies is also coming up. So I'm led here also by the way that you introduce things, Brandon and Anna especially, to my second question, which deals with challenges on the level of methods and also, again, disciplinary definitions that maybe someone has to face. So what are the biggest challenges you identify or maybe have previously identified in your work as sound researchers or practitioners? And this is, again, broadly speaking, as researchers and practitioners who deal with sound in one capacity or another. And do you find that these relate maybe to broader epistemological or methodological tensions within sound-related disciplines? So that could be sound studies, or more broadly speaking, tensions between different disciplines dealing with sound and listening. That could include the humanities and sciences. And again, there's another entire area there that has to do with listening, mostly related to audiology or psychoacoustics, and there's also that side of things maybe. And if so, if you have been facing challenges that are related to these disciplinary definitions, could you elaborate more on those? What is your response maybe in relation to these challenges? Starting again with Panos, I think, if you would like to.
Why don't we follow a different...
It's fine. Whoever wants to.
Right, yeah.
I'll take a breath now.
I got my cue. No, thank you. Yes. No, thank you for this question. And yeah, wonderful to hear also from everybody else on the panel. Let's see. I mean, I was thinking about this maybe on some level more broadly, not only in terms of a disciplinary framework, but maybe I can try to loop that in. But more in terms of, again, going back to questions of listening, maybe listening as witnessing as well. I think many of the things that Anna said certainly resonate. In terms of like the fundamental challenge about, one question would be, how to truly listen to that which you disagree with. And I think this is a nagging tension, I think, for all of us. Certainly if we start to recognize in listening the capacity for negotiating difference, for working at processes of repair, of seeing in listening this potentiality for community and et cetera, all those things that then sort of face a certain challenge, when confronted with that which we truly disagree with. So how to bring listening into that situation or into that moment, I think, remains like a key question. And then therefore, another thing might be, I think maybe even here we could think this space we've been having for the last days, how to create spaces in which we also truly confront that which is farthest from us. So I think we can maybe feel ourselves as being part of a community in which these discussions, these positions that we hold, a certain ideological position maybe, is something I think that we kind of feel we're in family here. Yes, we share a commonality, of positions, of discourses, of attitudes towards politics and life. And I find myself increasingly trying to figure out how to create spaces for really encountering in a productive manner that which is farthest from us. So I think many of the presentations over the last days have certainly brought in references to many other kinds of communities and ideologies that are very challenging for us and challenging, I would say, for the greater good. So again, how to bring listening into those kind of possibilities, I think this is a challenge. I have no answer, but feel, it's important maybe to deal with that question together. And maybe bringing this into, another framework in terms of sound studies. I've also been a little bit interested, maybe even over the last days, the ways in which maybe different kinds of understandings of sound play out, which is maybe could be summed up as a certain tension between understanding sound as something that harms as well as heals. And I think this moment in which there's a sort of inherent, interesting, challenging ambiguity to sound. And I was reminded of something that Zizek wrote, I think in The Plague of Fantasies, in a kind of appendix. I think he even writes about Modern Times, the film by Charlie Chaplin, which maybe some of you are familiar with this reference, where he looks at the ways in which Chaplin uses the same music for the opening sequence, I think, or the sequence in which the kind of dictator character is playing with the globe, bouncing it around. And then it's the same music that's played at the ending of the film, where the dictator is sort of like transformed into a hopeful, positive figure. So the same music is played in both sequences and is equally manipulative in terms of directing us towards particular emotions. And Zizek highlights this in, sort of identifying this as a sort of like inherent problematic of music, particularly that he also doesn't want to deal with, right? Like music is therefore, I don't know, I forget how he sums it up, but somehow or another he identifies this as an inherent problem, this ambiguity. And I think that's there also in sound and in sound studies, right? This moment in which sound is both harmful as well as potentially healing, to just kind of sum it up in a very quick manner. And I think this is very interesting, yes. And I also think that this maybe also is precisely what sound offers us as researchers, as thinkers, as individuals in life. The ways in which sound may also act as a guide to help us move past a certain dualistic construct, yes. So how sound sort of provides a non-dualistic potential framework, right? That can move thinking, that can move feeling, that can move relationalities in a very exciting, interesting, productive way, yes. So again, going back to that polarity between how do we listen to that which we truly disagree with, maybe actually within sound there's a guide already there to try to, again, move us into a sensibility, into a perspective that helps us see past opposition. Yes. And here we can even maybe just think even more epistemologically or even ontologically about self and other, about subject and object. Yeah. So I have always found sound to be a great help in understanding these things as non-dualistic. So again, here maybe within the context of contemporary crises, this might also help us interrupt human exceptionalism, yes. If we think less about the dichotomies between subject and objects, between humans and non-humans, between nature and culture, these things that continually kind of nag us and inform our thinking and approach to materiality and immateriality. Sound, again, is something that can traffic across, I think, in a very interesting, exciting way, to really also recognize somehow or another that I am nothing. So the nothingness of sound. I think to be a sonic subject is to also relate to this nothingness, yes, that is also everything, right? And I think here we can really appreciate how many kind of wisdom traditions, if we go into that realm, really also philosophize about sound in this manner as that which is close to the divine, yes, which is always somehow figure and ground, which is always somehow material and immaterial, that speaks to us while also being extremely ethereal, So that carries the sense of nothingness and everything together. So here we haven't really spoken about that, I think, the last days, relating to wisdom traditions, relating to spirituality, and all of those kind of philosophical traditions that equally deal a lot with listening and sound as a power. That is also maybe accentuating that ambiguity, again, the way that sound traffics between the terrestrial and the cosmic, between human material realities and a spiritual dimension. Sound is a messenger, yes, that is able to move across and deliver messages. So here again, I sort of find an interesting, offering a potentiality again to go back to the original question about how to, truly listen to that which we disagree with. Again, I think sound and listening can teach us a lot in terms of negotiating that challenge. Okay. Thank you.
Panos or Anna?
Thank you. Well, I have to say that I'm very much intrigued by the discussion up to now and the interventions of Brandon and Anna and Danae. And somehow I feel the imbalance here. You've been together for some days, listening to each other and listening to many things, and you're ready to share these experiences while I was away doing some other not so interesting things, perhaps. So it feels like that somehow I tried to avoid the question with the answer that I gave in the first place. So let me return to that and explain that talking about different ways of understanding, listening in different places, different contexts, different cultures, does not mean that I'm not interested in a kind of an experience of or an ontology of listening at the same time, and also the potentialities, the political, social, and other potentialities of listening and relating to the world and to the world through sound, especially. This is something that really attracted me in the study of sound, in the ethnography of sound. At the same time, I would insist in somehow keeping the balance between different ways of listening and our attitudes and our ideas about what interesting listening might be for us as personal, as political subjects, or as, I don't know, whatever. And in that sense, I would try to answer the second question posed by Danae, taking you to that direction again, the direction between different ways of listening, and what listening can mean in different contexts. So methodologically and epistemologically, for me at least, one of the most interesting and intriguing things that I share with other anthropologists of sound, I believe, is that on the first place you have to explain that you have to pay attention to listening and consider why listening could be interesting in terms of a different cultural experience. And in that sense, this issue relates not only to the subject itself, the topic of listening, but the way of presenting listening in different listenings in other contexts, in other areas, and in other venues. For example, one of the big issues in the anthropology of sound for many decades now is the way we will still continue writing about listening or talking about listening, or perhaps we could incorporate methodologies and ways of approaching sound through recordings, for example, through artistic work, for example. And what are the limits of writing or presenting sound and listening in those traditional ways of representation? So I'm talking about the big issue of the crisis of representation and how this relates to the media we use in order to present sound and listening as a cultural experience. So a main challenge from an anthropological perspective, from an ethnographic perspective, is to convince the scientific community or the anthropological community, but also to convince the people you are talking with and the people you are listening to and you are listening with, in order to convince them about the value of listening and the value of presenting listening in as a different kinds of listening as important cultural experiences, which are important to share with other people, with other cultures, with other communities. For me, this also has a very kind of practical aspect, which is the way we approach and represent and reveal and make heard the acoustic realities of other communities.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Anna, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, again, I will talk very specific about my work and the methodological tensions and challenges with regard to how we listen to the sources that we have. And I work with archival sources and interviews. So we're called to listen attentively between the lines of the language and the silence of the archive and what ends up in the archive, also this big discussion. But also to call attentively to the memory, the language, the silences, and the acoustics of oral testimony. In terms of the archival material, that in some cases, historical cases, we have to rely a lot on to get information. This is directly or indirectly linked to authoritarian regimes. And if that extends to mainstream media that are shaped by these official narratives. So listening in that sense of the archive always has to be in conjunction with the political situation, the propaganda, terror, and also has to be in conjunction with the testimonies of survivors in our attempt to produce historical fact, but also to understand the complexities of the sonic and auditory experience in carceral sites and displacement. So, but then survivor testimony has its own challenges and tensions, and I want to focus a little bit more on that because I deal with the trauma testimony, and trauma testimony is written with tensions and challenges, with contradictions, with discrepancies, with silences, with blocks of memories. And in that moment, there's a tension between historical facts and psychoanalytic truth, so to speak. And you find yourself in the middle of different kind of disciplines. And I want to give an example here, just to make it more concrete. I'll give an incident where I had this problem. During the dictatorship in Greece, there was a wedding of political prisoners that took place at Averov prison in Athens. It was a unique and unlikely event, and according to interviews I collected both by the women, two of the women who sang, and the couple, this featured very presently, very strongly in their testimonies. So as the couple moved towards the prison chapel, which was on the courtyard, the women kind of went on to the windows and started singing. So the women who sang recalled the song by Hatzidakis, Γύρνα φτερότη του Μήλου, and the couple recalled the song by Theodorakis, a political song. What do we do with this? How do we listen to this? Do we discard these testimonies as false memory, as in the past historians have done with Holocaust survivor memory? Or do we try to make sense of what these differences attest to? So in my kind of approach to these challenges I adopt a more symptomatic way in the psychoanalytic sense. And I try to understand through this way what this difference tells us about, and I try to kind of put or explore the political, the social, and the cultural aspects of sound and music in this context, and what it means. Why is this? Not why is this? And I'm not really interested which song was sung, but what does this say? What do we do with this? What does this tell us about the experience of sound in carceral spaces? So that's my approach, and I think it's important to allow for these counterpoints to be there, and not to be evened out or understood as an anomaly, but to kind of resonate and just open up this conversation. And in this approach, I found this in kind of adopting this approach of listening through these challenges, I found a lot of kind of very helpful the research that has been conducted by people who have worked with the Holocaust testimonies, and particularly James Young, who talks about these particular discrepancies, and he says that the fact that we have so many different stories about the Holocaust is not that what happened was different, but because it has been registered, at the core of each one's experience in a different way. And I think it's very important to allow, for these challenges and tensions to remain, in a sense, unresolved and resonating, and maybe just try and listen to them, to what they may be saying. I don't know if that.
No, this has been really helpful. I'm thinking here that already we are entering a discussion that goes closer to one of the themes of your project, Anna, and also the theme of these few days, which is the idea of ethics in relation also to witnessing and the witnessing offshoots, let's say, of listening practices. I'm using this word because I'm already grasping that we have very broad, again, definitions of listening as a practice that involves relationalities, it involves different steps of community making sometimes, and also exploring very tense moments that extend way beyond the actual moment of, let's say, an oral encounter. So, for instance, we have been talking so far about listening that relates to particular experiences of interviewing people, of reading testimonies that have been remaining, in archives and haven't been explored in many different ways, of sometimes collating and cross-referencing information that comes from many different types of sources, some textual and some pictorial and some auditory, of thinking about listening also as this embodied experience that has been a theme in this particular few days as well, and during the symposium. All these imply also different understandings of ethics, which are informed by different disciplinary ideas, of course. So ethics, in the context of carrying out research in the social sciences, may be mostly also related to questions of filling out ethics consent forms, and so ethics as something that you have to comply to in the context of an institutional encounter is obviously something very different to ethics as a broader consideration, as has been touched here.